If you paid attention to my Twitter or my community tab, you might have noticed I've gotten into this brand new series as of late. Now, this pretty obscure series, you probably haven't even heard of it. It's called the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson, and I gotta say, it's probably the greatest series I've ever read. Like, holy shit. It is fantastic. I feel like this series was just crafted for me. The world is unique, fascinating, and really interesting to read about. It's unlike anything else I've delved into in fantasy. A hard magic system that is so detailed, you can almost envision yourself gamifying it in some way, so much that the characters themselves inside of their own story are actually finding ways to exploit their own powers. A writing style that actually values my intelligence, which is sometimes a little difficult to come by. And I've been having a blast. And normally, I wouldn't make, videos based off just a book series, but there's actually going to be a Stormlight Archive tabletop game, or really more specifically, a Cosmere RPG, which is just all of Brandon Sanderson's expanded work. Now, that it's a tabletop game means it's my purview, which means I can do myself a good old overview. For those of you who either want to jump right into the series, or want to play the tabletop game for yourself when it eventually drops or is out, but feel a little intimidated by the 5 books, each of which are 1,000 pages long. Because oh boy. So I'm going to break down the actual World of Roshar without spoilers, and I'm going to do this in 2 parts, which first part is just going to be the world itself. The second part is where I'm going to go into the magic system, the Knights Radiant, and some of the more expanded stuff, which gets a little bit more spoilery territory. This at least is all the information you would glean from just the first book and really early on first book information.
Thank you to all my channel members for making these videos possible.
And I think the best way of doing this, first and foremost, is by taking a look really far out and just zooming in slowly as we get closer to the planet our story is set on. Now, the entire story takes place in what is known as the Cosmere. Now, the Cosmere is the name for the overall universe that all of Brandon Sanderson's work takes place in. Because all of these works, like Mistborn, Elantris, all that, they're all connected to Stormlight Archive. They all take place in the same universe, just different planets. Which there is a large meta plot that is occurring. But do you actually need to read all these books first before jumping into really any of them? Despite what all the reading orders might say, not really. You can just jump into Stormlight or Mistborn or whatever. At most, there's little Easter eggs and characters and references to stuff or shared universal concepts that might get some gleamed, stronger information from the other series. So it is worth reading all of his work, and to be fair, everything I keep seeing, it's all good. I'm gonna have to actually read Mistborn. Goddamn, it looks great. From that lens, let's take a zoom in on the Roshar system, and then a zoom in on the planet itself of Roshar. Which Roshar is a planet that is made up of mostly water, slightly smaller than Earth, and has 3 moons, which kind of fucks with its climate a bit. This is a planet that has a really wonky weather system, get into later. The actual landscape of Roshar is quite different to Earth, depending on where you're looking. Starting westward, moving on eastward, westward is where you see the more Earth-like nature landscapes, beautiful idyllic countryside, regular animals, cows, chickens, all that shit. However, as you move more eastward, it starts becoming more of a barren landscape. The grass turning into rocks and all the animals getting hard shells. Basically, all the plant life is now reactive in some way. You touch a plant, it's going to curl in on itself. If there is grass, it's going to actually bury itself back into the ground. Oh, is that a tree? You give it a hearty slap on the tree ass and it's gonna lay prone. And then all these animals suddenly are all crustaceans, like your axe hounds, which are crab dogs. You got kremlings, which are tiny little crab vermin. You got your chols, your big crab beast of burden. You can tie a cart to them and they, keep moving your cart. It's pretty helpful. Or giant predatory chasm fiends, which are terrifying and huge. Now, why is this? Why is everything crab? Beside the fact that everything evolves into crabs, this is for one very, very good reason. Something that's actually in the name of this dang old series. The Highstorm. As in storm, stormlight, haha. The Highstorm is a regular event in the world of Roshar. It originates from something called the Origin, right off the eastern edge of Roshar, somewhere out in the ocean. Now, the Highstorm is literally just a giant storm that makes its way across the planet. Just going across the countryside, being a giant natural disaster, and it's horrifying to deal with. Hitting the continent in a literal wall of a storm called the Storm Wall. It is a wall of horrible wind, lightning, carrying giant boulders and whatever it finds. You find yourself inside of the Highstorm when it hits and you're not in like a shelter, you are dead. There's no other way about it. You are going to die. Get to a Highstorm shelter. And alongside this, we actually have the weather system of Roshar, which is wonky. See, it has 3 moons. Those 3 moons means it doesn't have like a regular orbit at all. The seasons are unpredictable. Summer is really just a period of random set of weeks where there's not many storms. Meanwhile, winters where it's a bit colder and there are more storms. The only thing that is actually regular on Roshar is a period of time known as the Weeping, where every 400 days, there's just a long period of weeks of constant pissing rain, which a common year on Roshar is 400 days because of that. Now that sounds rough, because it is. This is all pretty bad. But this is part of the way of life on Roshar. Everything is adapted to live around this Highstorm, which is why the wildlife, when it comes to the eastern side of it, is all adapted to react to the storm or is just hard-shelled. Meanwhile, if you live over westward, it's all idyllic, more like our world, because the Highstorms, honestly, it's just like a storm that hits you every once in a while. It's not as bad. It peters out as it travels across the continent. Therefore, they can be a bit more relaxed. Now, there is one slight upside when it comes to the Highstorm, which is going to hit the other part of the name of this series. That is known as Stormlight, which Stormlight is a power source that is used to power a lot of things. Mainly, Shardplate, Fabrials, and Surges. Surge is something I'm not going to get into, because like I said, it's going to come into the Knights Radiant, the magic system video, like, oh, that's another video. But Surges is really just the magic system you take in Stormlight. If you've done the specific criteria to get access to Surges, you can do certain forms of magic. An early form you will see if you start reading the book is gravity manipulation, which is also where I bring up, if you like hard rules and gamified magic systems, do you want to see gravity magic where it goes into like the physics of gravity manipulation? It's so sick. This is sick. Like, this art, this scene comes from chapter 2. You should read this series. Let's hit those other elements that it powers. Let's start with Shardplate. That's kind of fun. Shardplate is, best way I can describe it, it's like, picture some fantasy power armor, just with a bit more of a downside. We got your like Space Marine power armor, maybe your like Halo power armor. It's similar to that. You put on a thing of Shardplate covering your entire body, it fuses to you, and it shapes itself to you, just giving you a massive amount of protection. It also boosts basically all of your physical stats. You're faster, you hit harder, you're just physically stronger. You're just bulky and healthy. Which helps because this shit is so heavy. The only way you can actually wear Shardplate is by wearing powered Shardplate. This is important. Now, with it fully powered, you will be able to withstand a lot of punishment. People trying to attack you, it just dinks right off. Does basically nothing. However, you're not invincible. It's not going to withstand everything. You take too much damage or like something really bad happens, you get crushed by a big boulder like Wile E. Coyote style, you are actually just fucking dead. You're going to die. So, sucks. Or alternatively, as you're taking damage, the parts of the Shardplate will actually crack, which is making it leak out Stormlight, which is bad, because now that piece of armor is ruined, and as it's leaking out Stormlight, and eventually will lose Stormlight, you are now wearing a giant, very, very, very heavy piece of armor that you cannot lift. You are a sitting duck. I really hope that doesn't happen on the battlefield, because you're probably just fucking dead. With a priceless artifact that you're wearing, you are target number 1. Everybody wants this. The Shardplate and its duo counterpart, the Shardblades, which I'll get into in a second, were left behind by the Knights Radiant. Again, I'm not going to get into that right now. But the Knights Radiant left behind all of their Shardblades and the Shardplate in what is known as the Recreants, where this knightly order tasked with saving humanity from these calamitous events known as the Desolations laid down their arms, their Shardplate and their Shardblades, and abandoned humanity in their time of need. At least that's how the stories go. These artifacts are stupidly powerful and cannot be recreated. No one knows how. And having them is pretty major, which their counterpart, the Shardblades. Shardblades, this is a pretty loose comparison. Don't take this fully seriously. But it's kind of what the creator of the tabletop game told me when I was asking some questions of how they were designing the game. You can kind of think of Shardblade as like a lightsaber, like a fantasy lightsaber, kinda. So a Shardblade is a magical sword. Again, from far off time, no one knows how to recreate these, but these giant hulking swords are probably the most dangerous tools ever. They can cut through literally anything. You like cut through solid stone or like a building, it slices through like it's literally nothing. Just a clean cut. But it doesn't cut through one thing. It doesn't cut through people, like living matter, because it just passes through, almost like you're cutting through mist. However, anything living that it passes through, it severs, which if it passes through, say, for example, like your brain, your heart, your spine, you are dead. Insta-shot, just killed on the spot. Your eyes burn out of your skull and you are a dead man. Which also, if they don't pass through that aspect, but they pass through like your arms or your legs or something, it's severed. It might not be physically severed because it didn't cut, but your arm is never going to work again. No matter what type of healing, that arm is done. You got a dead arm now. Which, yeah, these things are dumb, big, and bulky. How do you even use one? Well, good news. This shit is weightless, actually. It weighs nothing. It might be 6 feet tall. They weigh nothing. Oh, but how do you even use them around? How do you sneak them around? Well, they exist in a pocket dimension. You just drop it and it de-summons. Then if you want it back, you hold your hand out, you bring it back into your world. It just takes 10 heartbeats to bring back. Shardblades are very strong, very rare, basically handcrafted for each person, and owning one basically uplifts you to become nobility. It's a big fucking deal. And scary. You don't want to tangle with a shard bearer, so all they have to do is just swing their sword around wildly, and they'll cleave through people. Though, I mean, there's the downside, like, you don't want to use this indoors, because it's too bulky to, like, wield inside, so it's, like, only, like, an outside battlefield kind of deal. The other thing that Stormlight is powered is with Fabrials, which Fabrials are pieces of tech that also came from a long time ago. However, this stuff is actually iterated on and is recreated. Fabrials are pieces of technology that do a lot of different things. They can do things like add something. They can tell time. They can take something away. I'm being very nebulous because they have a lot of properties. Artifabrians are very smart people who have found many different ways to utilize this tech to do some fancy things. Like, for example, you can use a Fabrial to, instead of using a flame hearth, you can make a flame Fabrial, which then generates heat, like a heater. You can make a Fabrial that literally steals the pain from a person and like takes it into the device, which helps surgeons a lot. It's really useful, which then the most rare form of Fabrial is what is known as a Soulcaster, which has not been able to be recreated. Soulcaster is complicated, not super well detailed, and archaic. Soulcasters, essentially when used by a Soulcaster, is able to turn something into something else. Now, there are a lot of different properties for this. A lot of Soulcasters do things like turning a regular item like rock or refuse into food. You can turn something into ash or flame, shit, or stone into actual metal that you can use. It's really useful. Just the tag of I can turn blank into blank is great. Though there's a lot of secrecy and a lot of weird shit tied to this. So there are probably catches that the Soulcasters are not telling everybody. Which, how do these even work? Well, use a Stormlight and a captured Spren to do all these things. Now what, oh god, is a Spren? This is going to be very important, okay? So Spren are, I'm going to be very simplistic, are spirits that embody some sort of concept. Be they like emotional or a raw concept of nature or something. But really, it's kind of like a personification of a thing. There are things like wind spren or flame spren. Flame spren, who are like little insects that dance inside a flame, or wind spren that honestly have a lot of different shapes. They change shape constantly, being even a little humanoid or like ribbons in the air. They can actually do some minor speaking, but they're not intelligent. But they're like trickster fae spirits almost. There are also like emotional based spren. They're like pain spren. These orange sinewy hands that reach out of the ground. There are shame spren, passion spren, anger spren. Like there's so many types. Like the rumored death spren, which you're apparently only able to see right before you die. Or even something like rot spren, which are spren that actually are attracted to religious wounds, which you have to chase away with water, soap, or antiseptic. There are a lot. There are literally thousands of types of spren, and the commonality of them, how often they show up, it's a whole thing, really. Hiding your emotions on Roshar can be kind of tricky. You're in a moment of a lot of like shame or embarrassment, and then a bunch of shame spren start like being little like crystals in the air, like right above your head. Makes it a little hard if you're trying to like compose yourself in the court. Some people, you know, can just point and laugh at you because you can't hide your embarrassment. We see the crystals, dude. Which, and then some areas, spren are less common. Or even the types of spren, they're not like appearing constantly. You're not seeing just waves of spren around every single person. You got like hordes of people all feeling the same emotion. They're not appearing around everybody. It's really weird and doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's just something you're going to see a lot. When an emotion is described in the Stormlight Archives, usually a spren is pretty close by. Which I'm going to wrap this up with going over the inhabitants of this world. Now, this isn't a fantasy world where you're going to see like elves and dwarves and tieflings and all that. You're not going to get your D&D stuff, your Tolkien shit. You're not going to get any of that here. Because really, we have humans and then like a couple of non-human races. Which there's only one that I think is super pressing for this story. There are two, but you know, one is I'm going to talk about here. But just to go over some of the nations, because there's like 22, 24, there's like a decent chunk. All of which very interesting, vary in culture and appearance. They're very, very interesting and also differ from us, like on Earth humans, a lot. But the main one you're going to be hearing a lot is the nation of Alethi. The Alethi that live in it are all very tan-skinned, tall as fuck, like 6 foot, 6'5", dark-haired, and very militaristic in reputation. They like to lead very honorable lives, and it is led by a bunch of high princes that, at least in name, are unified. They like to spar with each other, and they really like to spar with their neighbors, which, yeah, they're not popular. But the Alethi are really a large focal point of a lot of like the characters are from Alethkar. Like one large piece of culture there is eye color. Eye color is very, very important. The color of your eyes dictates a caste system that is there. If you have lighter toned eyes, you are higher ranked and higher nobility. You are light eyes. If you have darker eyes, you are a lower born member of the society. You are a dark eyes. Which the eye color like varies a lot. It can go from like, you know, you have like light blues, even like whites or like bright purples in stuff. It's not like fully just our eye colors. But the Alethi also follow like strict gender roles. These strict gender roles obviously dictate a lot of the ways that they live their lives. Men are the only ones who wage war. Meanwhile, women lead more scholarly and artistic lives, becoming scientists or, for example, being the only ones who know how to read. So I hope the 99% of my male audience, if you're going to follow proper Alethi customs, have found a woman to transcribe your comment for you. As well, this bleeds into a main religion in Roshar known as Vorinism, which is also very, very interesting, which plays into like the idea that you need to master a specific skill to bring it up to heaven because, heaven is in a war. You gotta go to heaven because heaven is currently conquered by the enemy, demons. So you gotta go up to heaven and fight back, which is why all the men are all warriors, because you gotta be the best warrior ever, so you can go kick ass in the Tranquiline Halls and get it back so you can have paradise, which is, I think, very cool concept for heaven, to be completely honest. That's not even the short of it. There's so much more I could actually go into their culture. Like the fact Alethi women cover their left hand, which is known as their safe hand, that has to be like covered either in a special sleeve or in a glove. because under Vorinistic like teachings, and especially Alethi teachings, it's actually super inappropriate to be seen with your left hand exposed. It's almost like being seen naked. Therefore, you gotta wear that like special covering for it. And if you want to be a little taboo, you could be a little risque and wear fingerless gloves. Oh, shock, horror. I think this is a thing that sounds really funny out of context, which is why I like sharing it. However, when you actually read the books, feels super justified and really interesting of like, yeah, you know, we also have weird taboos that we carry, and examining another culture's like version of a taboo is very cool. It also does lead to moments in the story where a character gets all hot and bothered because, oh man, I can see part of the knuckle. Oh man. But there are a lot of very, very cool nations. The Shin in Shinovar, who lead very like isolated lives. They differ from a lot of people on Roshar. They actually value jobs of creation, like craftsmen and farmers, over jobs of killing, like warriors or anything like that. If you have a job like that, you're actually treated as a slave and sold as property. And as well, with their appearance, they're very like light-skinned, round faces. They are a lot of times bald and have kind of like wide circular eyes, which make people think they're very young. We also have like the Unalaki, who live up in the mountains, and they live around these hot springs, which are all like life-granting in some kind of spiritual way. They worship the Spren in their own like form of religion. They also claim that hard-shelled beings taste really good, like just crunching on shells. They really like it. They live up in the Horn-Eater Peaks, and as such, they're called Horn-Eaters. They also like eating things you shouldn't be eating according to everyone else, like horns and shells and all that. I'll be honest, the one lens we really have into the Unalaki culture is a chef, so I trust him. I'd eat a shell if he made it, from everything he's described. We got the Aesir, which is actually a group I really, really enjoy. They're highly bureaucratic, like to a ridiculous extent. They nominate their next monarch through a really annoying bureaucratic process that requires a essay contest, and whoever writes the best essay and shows the best traits is like elected as their new leader. They also just have an insanely dense legal system that is almost like revered and very spiritual to them. The best praise you can get for the Aesir is being put inside of their like legal records, which I think is really fun. They're really interesting people. But there are so many more that I could talk about, but I do need to talk about the Parshmen. Parshmen are one of the two non-human races on Roshar, and Parshmen are in a pretty rough boat, I'm not gonna lie. Parshmen are a group of people that are kind of lower intelligence, almost like their personalities and their almost like sense of being has been dulled and like lowered. It's hard to even like get a response from a Parshman, or just to get really anything from them. They just kind of stand around and exist, to the point where you almost forget that Parshmen are like around. They don't communicate with you unless you like really constantly try to provoke them. And because of this like dead-end state that they are in, and the fact that they've kind of developed alongside humans and human history, humans did what humans do best and enslaved all of them. And now they are a part of the economy because they are an elite labor force. They are probably the most valuable slaves on Roshar because you have a slave force that has never once tried to rebel, will never run away from you, will never argue against a task you give them. Just they listen to anything and they will carry out what you tell them to do until you tell them to do something else or to stop. So yeah, they got enslaved like right away, and this is how it was going until the Alethi went out into the Shattered Plains and met a group that they would dub the Parshendi. Now the Parshendi, there's a bit of a troubling issue with them. They looked really, really similar to the Parshmen, like super similar. And another problem, the Parshendi had like personalities and society. They could communicate and were like full people with none of like the deadened traits of a Parshman. And so obviously a lot of people are very, very worried about this on both ends if this causes a giant slave revolt. Because yeah, the humans be humans and they want to protect their economy and their slaves. Gross shit like that. And the Alethi and the Parshendi were actually working together and dealing with each other diplomatically. This was working for a bit until the Parshendi, at some random point, just decided to turn on the Alethi and struck at them, which has now, currently, where our story takes place, has led to a large war out in the Shattered Plains that has been going on for 7 years, known as the Vengeance Pact. If you want to know what that is, why that's going on, like that whole shit, you're gonna have to actually read the book, because again, this happens right at the beginning of the book. This is like really early on, the first couple chapters. So just go read it. I can't do it justice. You have to just check it out. So yeah, if you like this, honestly, like, comment, subscribe. I'm gonna make more of this. I really like this system, the setting. I'm gonna cover more of the game stuff later too. I'm overall just excited, and I'm gonna cover, more stuff as I actually finish the series, because I'm on like book 3 right now. But yeah, that's about it. So see ya.